Hey folks, it's Famous Dave here, and this is video 3 in my series on strumming. Obviously this one is going to be a little bit more advanced than the previous two. You should be comfortable playing the Ghost strum at this stage. If you could play something like Best Day by Taylor Swift, or Unknown Legend by Neil Young, or Learning to Fly by Tom Petty, if you can manage those at full speed, then you're ready to tackle this video. Now here we are going to examine some variations on the typical Ghost strum pattern and other techniques that can also be used, such as quick palm mutes in the middle of a strum. Mumford & Sons do that a lot. We're going to use percussive mutes. Which are used all over the place. We'll put chord changes in the middle of a bar, like in Talking About a Revolution, for example, by Tracy Chapman. We're going to look at a few other topics as well. This video is going to be a little bit more loosey-goosey than the others. I'll be moving through the examples pretty quickly, spending not a huge amount of time really dissecting each technique, more just giving you an example, a little demonstration, and then moving on. Now the reasons for this are twofold. Firstly, I have a lot of stuff to try and get through in the video, so in order to keep it under 2.5 hours, I'm going to try and just move through things as quickly as possible. But more importantly, the second reason is centered around you, the student. If you're ready for this video, then hopefully you're also getting better at learning things more quickly, picking things up by ear, and learning and practicing under your own initiative. If so, then you're also ready to do some investigating and exploring for yourself. I'll be mentioning lots of artists and songs, and you can go find those tunes and put all this stuff into practice by playing along with those songs by the original artists. Now I've actually made this a little bit easier for you by putting together a Spotify playlist featuring all the songs that I'm going to mention in this video, plus a whole heap more, and the link to that is in the description below. The first variation that we're going to look at is the Dum-Ching variation, or sometimes known as the boom chuck, or pluck strum. I don't know if Dum-Ching is a widely used term for this or whether I invented it. I'm not going to claim credit for it, but either way, Dum-Ching is exactly what this technique sounds like. I'm going to start with a chord of G. What you do is you firstly pluck the lowest note in the chord. Because I'm playing G, that's my E string, so you pluck that and then follow up with a down strum. So it's like Dum-Ching, Dum-Ching, Dum-Ching. If you move to a chord with a root on a different string, such as C, whose root is on the A string, then you also have to adjust your strumming hand to pluck that string instead, like so. Back to G, Dum-Ching, Dum-Ching, Dum-Ching. So I still have the overall sort of down, up, down, up, down, up kind of swing. It's just a little bit more refined in this case. A lot of old country music uses this technique, often coupled with a palm mute, which we'll look at soon. A lot of Johnny Cash tunes, Ring of Fire, Folsom Prison Blues, that kind of stuff. I hear the train a-coming, rolling around the bend, etc, etc. Of course, we can also use our up strum in addition to the Dum-Ching pattern, and we can call this the ah. So we can go Dum-Ching, 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 ah. You can use this pattern in songs like Dirty Old Town by the Pogues. I met my love by the gas yard wall, dreamed a dream by the old canal. You could use it in Sit Down by James, sing myself to sleep, a song from the darkest hour, secrets I can't keep, etc, etc. You can also stretch this out a bit to get something like this. dum, dum, ching, ching, dum, dum, ching, ching, and then you can get a tune like this. Hold on, little girl, show me what he's done to you. Stand up, little girl, a broken heart can't be that bad when it's through, it's through. The fate will twist of both of you. So come on, baby, come on over, let me be the one to show you. Woohoo, that's high, oh boy. Anyway, dum-ching-ah, dum-dum, ching-ching-ah, or any variation thereof that you like. Variation 2, changes in the middle of the bar or in the middle of the strumming pattern. Up to now we've used chord changes that line up with the one count in our bar, or they change with whatever the repeating pattern of the strum is. So like the ghost strum for Best Day, for example. You do the full pattern, then you change to another chord and then another chord. To Be With You, for example, we had dum dum ching ching dum dum ching ching dum dum dum. So each strum pattern and each chord are like their own sort of little self-contained unit. However, there are also occasions where we want to change a chord in the middle of the strum pattern or in the middle of the bar, so that the chord change will land somewhere in there while we're still kind of in full flow of our down, down, up, up, down, up, or whatever the pattern might be. Now, you might have to work a little bit harder to get used to placing these changes. A great example of this is Talking About a Revolution by Tracy Chapman, which starts like this. So I'm using my ghost strum. 1, 2, and 4, and 1, 2, and 4, and 1, 2, and. But the chord changes happen in the middle of the pattern. Another example using the same chords actually is Learning to Fly by Tom Petty. I think the chords are in a different order. Learning to fly, learning to fly, da, da, da. I don't know the words, but you can see the chords there are happening not only on the one of the bar but also in the middle of it. So that's changes. Variation 2, changes in the middle of the bar. Variation number 3, hammer-ons within a chord. Songs that use this include Tequila Sunrise, Save Tonight, Into the Mystic, Long Train Running, and loads of others. So this is where you first strum an unfinished fingering of a chord, and then before you strum again, you hammer on 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 fingers to change the chord or change the sound of the chord. So it goes like this. I'll play a C chord with my second finger off, strum, which gives me that sound, and then hammer on into the full position. I can do 2 fingers. I could do 3. It won't sound great with a C chord, but 3 will work with an A minor. You can also do the opposite. You can do a pull-off. And these are often combined within the same pattern, a hammer-on and a pull-off. Really good example of this is Into the Mystic. It's actually played on capo 3. Into the Mystic by Van Morrison, which also uses a little bit of percussive muting, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. But here's Into the Mystic. So it starts on a C chord with the little hammer on there, and it goes a bit like this. That's variation 3, hammer on and pull off within a chord. Variation 4, palm muting. So palm muting is a technique that slightly dampens the strings but doesn't kill the sound entirely. Electric guitarists use this all the time, especially in rock and metal music, but it's also very useful in certain acoustic patterns too. What you do is you rest the fleshy part, the sort of the squidgy outside part of your palm along the strings, just resting them gently kind of right along the bridge. So you rest them along the strings and it will soften the sound and prevent the strings from sustaining as long as usual. So I'm not pushing down very hard, I'm just gently pressing, kind of resting my hand against the strings, and I get that sort of sound, as opposed to full unmuted tone. Here it's a little bit damp, a little bit sort of muted, not quite as in your face. So when you're using this technique, you'll find that you constantly have to lift and replace your strumming hand. And when you're in the muting position, the wrist will come into play to do the strum. We can't swing the arm like we normally do because the wrist, the palm has to stay here in order to mute the strings. So now the wrist becomes the fulcrum and there's a little bit less range of motion there, but again, the rhythmic principles still apply. A Dum-Ching chinga pattern, which we looked at earlier, might sound a little bit like this. So there's fully muted, and if I lift up, so I'm kind of placing the hand down and then lifting it up as needed. So a lovely example of this pattern and muting technique is the tune Out on the Weekend by Neil Young, and the intro goes like this. It's a B minor chord to an E major. So that's variation 4, palm muting within your strum pattern. Variation 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Variation number 5, percussive patterns, such as Into the Mystic again, Proud Mary, Long Train Running, Faith by George Michael. A more extreme type of muting where you do actually kill the sound of the chord temporarily. This involves lifting the fretting hand pressure off the strings and letting them rest against the strings while simultaneously strumming, and it's a bit like this. So I strum and then I take the pressure off, keep my hand in the G position, sort of flatten my fingers against the strings and then get a mute. So I might go now, depending on the chord that you're playing at any given time, you might find it a little bit harder or a little bit easier to cover all the strings with your fretting hand. It might involve a little bit of movement. The strumming hand can help in this case, like this, so you can actually sort of mute the strings, bring it down to a palm mute position and kind of assist with the strumming hand, so you kind of mute from both sides. Bar chords, however, are a little bit easier because you're covering all the strings. So if you simply lift off the pressure, however, there's you'll get used to the various different sort of versions of left and right hand muting simultaneously, depending on what the chord is, depending on what your rhythm is. But again, it's a very useful and expressive kind of technique. The sort of the sound that we get from this mute is often placed at the same point where a snare drum would be in a bar, so it has the effect of replicating or implying the sound of a drum kit, or at least the snare drum. an example in the Spotify playlist there is Proud Mary, where you get a kind of a mute sound on the 2 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 3. See here how I'm using my pinky to mute the strings there. And one that uses a much faster and a much more prominent mute is Long Train Runnin', which also uses a bar chord and hammer-on chords and percussive muting. Here we go. So that's an E minor bar chord at the 7th position with a fast strum, with some wrist action, some hammer-ons and some percussive muting. It's all in the soup there. This technique can be used to great effect when you're finger picking too, and it's more of a slap with the strumming hand, or what's now the picking hand. I'll show you 2 examples of songs that I probably won't have to name. You'll definitely know them both, and they both use that slapping technique. So here's one. And the second. And there you go, variation 5, percussive muting. Now, I've run out of fingers. Variation number 6, very fast tempos. Examples being Save Tonight by Eagle Eye Cherry, Little Lion Man by Mumford & Sons, and Wake Me Up by Avicii. When I played Long Train Runnin' in the previous example, you might have noticed that my wrist was moving quite a lot. I had previously said in another video that the elbow should be kind of the fulcrum of the strumming engine, but as the tempo increases, it gets harder and harder to move the entire forearm quickly enough. And when this happens, the wrist can take over. You'll find that the arc of the pendulum will be much smaller, but otherwise the principle is the same. It's still a constant down and up motion, though sometimes we count the movement in what are known as 16th notes instead of 8th notes. So we might count it like 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a, instead of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, don't worry if you're not familiar with the distinction between 8th and 16th notes at this exact time. All that's really happening here is we're playing at a much faster speed. Everything is moving faster, and therefore the range of motion just gets tightened up and is a little bit smaller overall. So the wrist moves more so than the elbow. So a couple examples of this, Little Lion Man, which is capo on the 5th fret, Little Lion Man by Mumford & Sons. This is quite fast, uses some percussive muting, some hammer-ons as well, but it's a very fast tempo. I got a wrong chord at the end there, but you get the picture. You see the wrist going like the clappers here, and it's not so much the elbow anymore. Other example, what was that other example? Wake Me Up by Avicii. Not quite so frantic, but here we go. Now, economy of motion or economy of movement is really the key here. The less excess motion that we use, the easier and smoother this whole fast strumming is going to be. This goes for all these techniques, to be honest, but while you have some wiggle room at slower tempos, basically your arm can swing a lot more without affecting the sound. At very high tempos, any wasted travel of the wrist, like anytime it goes further than you need it to, it's going to have an impact because it has that distance to travel back again on the return leg of the journey, on the up strum, for example. Excuse me. And because our tempo is so fast, the time between down and up strums is vastly reduced. So we just don't have as much time to play with and as much motion to play with. Sometimes you don't even strum all the strings on the way down or up. Listen again to two different versions that I'm going to play for you of Wake Me Up. Watch how the excess movement affects the sound. In the kind of the first one, which is the quote unquote correct one, you'll notice that sometimes I don't even hit all of the strings on every strum, because I'm really restricting the amount of movement that I'm doing in the strum. So this is the sort of the correct one. So you get the overall flavor of each chord. You don't really notice that I'm not hitting all the strings unless you listen super carefully. Here though is one with too much movement, much more elbow, and listen to the difference. And watch the difference as well. You'll see the tension in my hand build up. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Can you see my arms starting to seize up there? It's much harder to maintain those high speeds with the full kind of forearm moving. So we transfer the fulcrum down to here, and that's a lot easier. It tends to be maybe a little bit quieter, but ultimately that's a kind of a trade-off that we are comfortable with when we play at these kind of tempos. As I said, economy of motion is really the main factor here. The less wasted movement we use, the more energy we can impart directly into creating the sound that we're looking for. Tension in the strumming arm overall can really spell disaster for fast patterns, even the slow ones too, but especially in the fast ones, you can tire yourself out super quick. So that is variation number 6. Fast tempos. Variation 7. Other patterns and how to figure them out. So there are so many potential variations of the ghost strum and this generic down up hand movement that it's just not possible to demonstrate them all in one video. However, as you go down the road of internalizing the various movements and hand movements involved that we've looked at in this video, you'll start to find it easier to figure out patterns by ear in exactly the same way that you can develop the skill of figuring out chord progressions and melodies by ear. You start to recognize patterns. You hear things you've heard before. You start to visualize, oh, this is how my hands move or would move if I were to play this thing that I'm hearing. And gradually it all just becomes much easier and more straightforward. But what would that look like to begin with? In order to try it out, let's examine one of the most famous strumming patterns of recent times. Well, if by recent, if 27 years ago counts as recent, God, am I really that old? Anyway, here's Wonderwall. Incidentally, I have a series of videos on how to play Wonderwall from a very beginner level right up to the full speed, full strum pattern playthrough. Links below. But this is what Wonderwall sounds like. Now, leave that going on in the background there, that's magic, isn't it? If you write this down in musical notation, it can look pretty daunting. And if you describe it using down, up terms, it'll go something like down, 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 up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up, down, up. And who has time to memorize all of that? Not me, and certainly not Noel Gallagher. Whenever he wrote the song, he wasn't doing either of those things. He was just imagining a riff and a pattern, a strum pattern in his head that he thought would sound good, and because of his fantastic strumming technique, he was immediately able to play what he heard in his head. You'll get to this point too with enough practice, but we're going to firstly sort of reverse engineer that pattern, break it down, and we're going to use all our strumming knowledge to figure out this famous strum pattern. So firstly, let's just listen to it. Here it goes. Remember, most strumming patterns are comprised of pendulum motion at a particular tempo. If we can figure out how fast the arm is swinging, then the rest should fall into place pretty quickly. So first, I'm simply going to say the pattern that I hear. So that sounds pretty ridiculous, but what I'm doing is I'm trying to find kind of the speed of the strum, speed of the hand movement. All I need to do now is find the fastest series of notes in there, because that'll tell me how fast the arm is moving. Those fastest notes appear fairly early in the pattern, and I can be pretty sure that that's how fast Noel is strumming. So we'll just listen to it as it comes around again. Here we go. Dum dum da da ba da ba dum da ba da ba dum da ba bam bam ba da ba dum da ba da ba. So that sounds kind of ridiculous, but that's actually a good indication of how fast the hand is moving. So if I move my hand, my pendulum, at that speed, then I'm a good part of the way there. Because at this stage, I might need to break the pattern down into smaller chunks in order to memorize it, but as long as my hand is moving at that speed, I'm either going to hit the strings on the way down or the way up, but they're all going to line up with the speed of and the position of the strums that I'm trying to replicate. So let's turn off the Wonderwall loop and let's go back to playing it ourselves. So, as I said, I might need to break down the pattern into small chunks to try and memorize it. And here I can use all the other techniques that we've looked at previously. We can use the hand map. We can draw the pattern using arrows and X's. We can vocalize it. But before too long, I will hopefully have broken it down into 4 sections, 1 per chord. So we'll have the E minor 7 section, then the G section, the D section, the A7 section, put them all together, and we're away on a hack. Now, obviously I've rushed through it there. This gets easier and more straightforward the more you do it. You get quicker at it. And in the Spotify playlist there are loads of songs for you to practice along with, including all of the ones featured in this video and loads more, which use a mixture of all the techniques that we've looked at so far. And there's even one great electric one which uses almost all of them in one riff. And that is a wrap for now. It's been a long road to get to here, but if you've got some benefit out of it, then it's definitely worth it. If you've any questions or comments, leave them below or shoot me an email. You can find that address on my website. In the meantime, keep playing, keep practicing, keep enjoying it, and I'll see you again real soon. Bye!